I was interested, we were talking quite a bit before we turned the camera on, but I was fascinated with your discussion on power. And I think a lot of guys might be thinking you're looking at solar, but you're really looking at hydroelectric, and it was a lot less complicated than I thought in listening to you talk about it.
Yeah, hydroelectric is absolutely your first choice if you could get it. And there's some new systems out there that are high pressure systems, and they take a pretty small amount of water. And you kind of have an idea when you think of hydroelectric of the big water wheel or some type of a big turbine where you need an 8-inch, 10-inch pipe to come and feed it, but that's not the case. I just looked at a system that was being fed by a 2-inch pipe with about 150 foot ahead. That's basically elevation gain down into a single nozzle system that was producing 40 amps out of a standard AC Delco alternator. And that 40 amps doesn't sound like a lot, but it's 24 hours a day.
Right.
It's producing all the time.
And then you're storing it in a battery.
Exactly. It's just like your car, but instead of feeding into one battery, you're feeding into a bank of 20, 40, even maybe 60 batteries and a day. And the solar is just, there's only about, actually, and we're on the 45th parallel. Mm-hmm. It's not ideal for solar. Arizona would be a different thing. We only have actually about a 4.5 hour effective usage of daylight in this area in the wintertime.
And we see the sun 2 times a year.
Yeah, and that's in ideal conditions.
Right.
That's not counting for a bunch of snow sitting on the solar panel or clouds or rain. All that stuff diminishes its capability. So it's not ideal. Your quality of life would have to be really cut down to run solar.
So you could have a cistern with a 2-inch pipe down to your
system.
And
if you have a water system, what you do is you basically encase it, and you want to build a concrete structure around it, and you want to grab onto it with pipe, and this you want to be sure and bury it if you're in cold climate. Make sure you blow the frost on.
The whole run is buried then.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because it'll freeze up on you, and not only that, but the UV, a lot of that pipe is not UV rated, and the sun will break it down. So it's easier just to bury it, use regular schedule 40, schedule 80 pipe, and then you'll run it down to your manifold on your pump, which actually just turns an automotive style alternator. And it's a passive system, and then the water falls down into a cistern, which you'll collect and use for your drinking water.
So dual purpose.
Dual purpose. Right. There is some stuff out there that is UV rated, but I don't think it's necessary. If you can put it underground.
Better to have it totally encased.
Right. And if you have a tree go down or a branch, the longer that's out in the sunlight, the more brittle it gets. And anything that falls on it, even animals will stop and investigate it and tear it up. Bears are notorious for getting involved.
You want that totally protected if that's your power source.
Right. Not only that, it's an eyesore, and it's just a target right to your house. Anyone that comes across it, it's going to follow it down there.
So it can actually be fairly hidden because it's underground.
Right. And
you've got the upper unit and the lower unit.
Right. You wouldn't even see it. Sometimes at the opening, you're not going to want to put a lot of dirt on there because you need to access it, because roots will grow in and they'll go down the pipe. You'll have to clean it out every year. So what people do is just pile up some fir browse or straw on top of that, and that'll be
and then you've got easy access.
Right, and it'll keep it from freezing. But yeah, hydroelectric is your first choice.
And how are you doing looking for your water source up there?
Well, I went up there yesterday, and like I said in the video, it was just too brushy. You know, we have those vine maples here; they're just almost impassable, and I wasn't able to find it. So I've got to take the cat up there and just brush that out. And I found it one time. I found it last winter because the snow piled up above those vine maples, and I snowshoed up there, and I found where the snow was melted around it.
Oh, okay.
And I know it's up there.
Now you just got to get up there.
Right.
And you have the tools for that now with that brush. That's beautiful.
And, you're going to help,
and the
right?
muscle come up there and help you do that. I'll come up just to see that caterpillar running. I'd like to see that. I'm a tool person.
Yeah. Well, if you can run a tool, you can run that.
I think you've struck a chord with a lot of people with your off-grid, or at least that aspect of your channel. That's certainly, I think, struck a chord with people, because I think a lot of people are feeling, I need to be preparing at least at some level like that.
I think you're right. I think what all of us are realizing is that the government is, the people that are going to Washington, they're not going to fix our problems because they don't know how.
Right.
And people are starting to wake up and realize that, you know what, I'm going to have to take things into my own hand. So all
Self-reliant.
Self-reliance. All of these problems and this wake-up call, you know, I think it might turn out to be a blessing because it's going to wake people out of their lull of sense security upon a dependency of our government, our systems, how water power is delivered.
And we have a good system, but it's not as robust as everybody thinks it is.
Right.
It can be interrupted for a variety of things, and then suddenly you realize how important it is to have access to water, access to food, power.
Right.
We need those.
Yeah. If you want to, just to get a little idea of what it's going to be like, I'll give you this little challenge. Go into your garage and turn your main breaker panel off. Let's do this for 2 days. And take your key out to the street and shut your water off. Or you take your crescent wrench out there and see, you're going to get an education. You're going to get an education when you want to...
Probably in the first 2 hours.
When you want to use the toilet. Yeah. And if you don't have water and you live in a regular city environment with a small lot, how are you going to handle waste for a family of 4 or 5? That's a huge problem and a huge health hazard. And you compound that up with multiple families in the environment and not being able...
quickly.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's important because a lot of people put water away, a gallon per person per day as a common suggestion, but that's for consumption, and it's not taking into account sanitary, flushing a toilet.
Right.
It takes at least how many gallons to flush a toilet?
Well, the old toilets took almost 5 gallons. The new ones are a lot more efficient. They take just under 2.
So that's a water supply for a family of 5 gone in one flush.
That's
Hi.
I thought I would come in and introduce myself.
Just wanted to talk to you about was that I've enjoyed the most in your videos is the wilderness survival. You really struck a chord with me is when you ask how many of you carry around a suture kit
Right.
and don't have any idea to use it.
Right.
And I have to say I'm guilty for that because part of paramedic training was that we did no sutures. You know, it was basically airway breathing and make sure that was intact, and then we left that other stuff to you guys.
Right.
So I was guilty of that. I had the kit in there, and I only had one, so I was reticent to break it open to see what was in there.
And the reason I did those videos, and I think the reason now that I'm kind of in this community a little bit, is because I'm fascinated with first aid kits.
Mm-hmm.
And I would see everybody go through their first aid kit, and they would pull out a suture, or they would say, here's dental floss, and I'll pull that off and I'll suture.
Right.
Or the worst thing is paracord, and I'm going to pull out the paracord and you can use it for suture.
Right.
And then I thought,
I'll manage the infection later.
I wonder, do they know how to do the suture?
Right.
So that's kind of how that came about, and I certainly am not advocating, if you get a cut and you're here, you should go to the doctor.
Right.
But if you're way out and that's one of your options you're going to consider, I'd rather have people have an understanding of how to apply it, what the risks are, and at least have some knowledge rather than whipping out dental floss and
Right.
that kind of thing.
Now, a lot of us I know are carrying either traditional butterfly bandages or steri strips. When is a steri strip okay, and when does it get to a point where we need to consider doing suture?
I think the first option is going to be to use steri strips and butterflies, and you can put steri strips on and then reinforce that with, some duct tape or butterfly dressings. I think suturing is going to be last resort, and I think it's going to maybe buy you some time if you've got a laceration on a forearm or something to close that. But I would stay away from anything over joints, fingers, faces. Should not do unless you really know what you're doing. And
That's because of scarring.
Scarring and risk of infection. But if you close like a cut on a forearm and say it's big and gaping and the steri strips aren't working, that's when I would consider using suturing. You could also do nothing. You could just pack it with gauze and put a compressive dressing on and say, we're going to have to pack out of here, and if it takes you a day or two, a doctor can close that a day or two later. It's called a delayed primary closure, and it's totally fine. But if you're in a remote setting, like I can think of people like maybe a remote setting in Alaska, or maybe deep water sailing, or I mean, you could think of all sort of different scenarios where you're not going to get to a doctor and you're it.
Yeah.
That's kind of where those videos are aimed at.
Right.